Released in 1980, 17 Seconds is the second studio album by The Cure. It's a landmark of atmospheric minimalism that signalled the band's transformation into post-punk innovators. The record is defined by its haunting melodies and pioneering production techniques, and remains a classic for its emotionally raw, ethereal sound. 17 Seconds very much marked a departure from The Cure's earlier, more direct punk-influenced style, and established a new aesthetic that would come to define much of the 1980s alternative scene. The bleak, introspective tone of the album was influenced by personal turmoil and the band's lineup changes. Bassist Simon Gallup had only just taken over from Michael Dempsey, who'd left the band prior to recording, after disagreeing with Robert Smith over the band's direction. Smith said, "I think the final straw came when I played Michael the demos for the next album and he hated them. He wanted us to be XTC Part 2, and if anything, I wanted us to be the Banshees Part 2, so he left." Matthew Hartley also joined on keyboards, with original member Lol Tolhurst on drums, forming the quartet. The album was recorded at Morgan Studio One in London over a single week in January 1980. Constraints were severe. The band had less than £3,000 for the entire sessions, which forced them to sleep on the studio floor, working a marathon 17-hour day. Producer Mike Hedges, previously a tape operator and engineer, co-produced alongside Robert Smith. Hedges' willingness to experiment, combined with Smith's desire for total creative control, led to innovative results. Tolhurst recalls the studio's almost supernatural atmosphere. "We slept in the old Morgan Studio One, which was kind of creepy, as it used to be a church. Above the new ceiling was an old stained glass roof. When the studio was dark, it glowed ghostly, a setting that reflected perfectly the mood of the album." Inspiration for the songs came in a similar fashion. Smith wrote nearly all the material at his parents' house, sometimes after long, solitary drives home from gigs, reflecting the sense of isolation and detachment the album vividly portrays. The absence of demo tracks meant that material was rehearsed at Smith's parents' house, mostly on a Hammond organ, with songs played live in the studio before they then recorded the main backing tracks, with guitars, keyboards and vocals being recorded after as overdubs. There's a general misconception that the drums on 17 Seconds are from a drum machine, but they are in fact played on an acoustic kit, but the miking technique to achieve this sound was anything but conventional. Producer Mike Hedges explains, "It really was the drum sound that largely defined the album's sonic direction. The C-Juicer contact mic had just arrived on the scene at the time, and after testing it in another studio, I decided to mic the entire drum kit with these C-Juicers. I had initially tested the mic on other instruments, not drums, but then when I briefly tested it on drums, I thought, God, they sound fantastic like that. There's absolutely no spill between the different drums when you use it. Each drum is completely separate. Every part of the kit was therefore mic'd with these C-Juicers, kick, snare, hi-hat, 3 or 4 rototoms, and 2 crash cymbals. And this gave us a very contained drum sound with no space at all. Everything is right up close. There's no ambience whatsoever. And we then used reverbs and delays to give us the shape and the sizes. I think the fact that the drums had such little ambience and were so sterile and cold really set up the mood we loved. The cymbals were recorded separately and heavily compressed. An example of this sound can be heard prominently on Play for Today, where they use 3 1176 compressors in a row for this heavy wash effect. Apparently, it sustains for almost 20 seconds. To further their quest for a dry, machine-like quality to the drum sound, they also used loops, and being as it was 1980 with no samplers available, they were created by running huge 16 or 32 bar sections of tape around the room. These loops were 30 or 40 feet long, and it was an engineering feat to make sure they got the tension correct as it curved around pencils taped to mic stands out and back in the Studer tape machine. To complete the backing track, Gallup played his Fender Precision bass with rotor-sound flat-wound strings through an Ampeg SVT amp. He also notably used effects including the Boss BF2 flanger and CE2 chorus. His style, less ornate than predecessor Michael Dempsey's, meshed perfectly with Smith's pared-back vision. Coupled with precise drum patterns, Gallup's bass provided the heartbeat of classics like A Forest. Smith played his Fender Jazzmaster going into a Roland JC120, which was close mic with a Shure SM57, while a Neumann U47 was positioned about 3 feet away. The Jazzmaster was modified with the addition of a middle pickup from his first guitar, a Woolworths Top 20. The guitar, bought from the popular UK high street store, was made by Tysco. Smith was fond of this guitar, but it was not really up to the task of professional recording, which is where the Jazzmaster came in. Still wanting to retain some of the sound of the Tysco, he removed a pickup from it to add a middle pickup on his new Jazzmaster to give it a unique sound. Keyboardist Hartley played a Mini Korg 700S synth and a Roland SR09 Mark I organ and string synth. These were recorded directly. Smith had a very definite idea of how the keyboard should be utilised, requesting Hartley only play single notes as opposed to chords. Hedges said, occasionally there were two-note chords, but these were a rarity, because the single note approach was a rule to keep it simple. Matthew did put up with this, but he eventually became less and less enamoured with it, especially once the band embarked on its first world tour, following the album's release. I mean, standing on stage and using one finger to play the keyboard lines had to be frustrating. He had another 9 fingers to play with, and it also didn't help that he only had a cheap little Roland analog keyboard. These restrictions ultimately led to Hartley quitting the band following the Australian leg of the album's tour. Smith recorded his vocals using the Neumann FET 47. Hedges remembers, "We'd do just one track, and if it wasn't right, we'd redo it, and if it still wasn't right, we'd maybe drop in 1 or 2 bits, but generally there was very little comping. We didn't really have the time. There might have been 2 guitar tracks comped into one, and there might have been 2 vocal tracks comped into one, but generally everything was as played or as sung." Having only 7 days to make the record, the work rate was intense, with the recording going up to 17 hours a day, with the band sleeping on the floor in between sessions. Despite this, they were still keen to get into the booze when it wasn't their turn in the live room. Hedges said, "Robert knew his limit and he stuck to it, and it was within his limit to be able to work and actually do a really good job of it. The others, meanwhile, would finish their parts and get so off their faces that they'd sort of fade out the way because they couldn't stand up. Once they were told, 'You've finished your bits for today,' they'd really go for it. And if their drinking ever encroached on the recording itself, we'd just stop that particular part and carry on the next day." The atmosphere at Morgan Studios was intensified by these sleeping arrangements and the ever-present sense of urgency. The albums even mixed within this 7-day period they had at the studio, with A Forest taking up almost the same amount of time as the rest of the songs put together, knowing it was one of their standout tracks and earmarked as a definite single. The final sound was cut to 53 seconds because the tape literally ran out, which is a definite testament to the constraints they had. The album was released in 1980, going to number 20 on the UK charts, and generally received positive reviews, praising the band's progression. It laid the groundwork for the band's legendary Dark trilogy that continued with Faith and Pornography. It remains a pioneer for ethereal post-punk music, with its innovative use of minimalism, space and mood. It's influenced countless bands over the years as well, from Interpol to Slowdive and beyond. The record endures for its atmospheric power and emotional honesty. Crafted in haste and hardship, yet left with a timeless, haunting beauty that continues to inspire listeners and musicians alike. If you'd like to see more videos about the recording process involved in creating these classic albums, then you can support this channel by using my affiliate links in the description. Thank you in advance for your help.